Imagine that everyone's life is a one-way road. It has a beginning and a natural ending. However, there are some serious bumps along the way. They could damage your car to the point of terminating your journey early. Now imagine having your damaged car fixed with the guarantee that, no matter at what point you are on the road, you're gonna see it through to the end. And that's what I do. And that's honestly a cheap price to pay. It all started when I was 8. My pet dwarf bunny, Mr. Fluffs, was only 2 years old when he had gotten sick. My parents had no money to take him to the vet in the next town, so the bunny died within half a week. I was devastated. I was never allowed to have a pet before. I was a lonely child having grown up in a rural area, with no siblings or no cousins nearby. It's not an overstatement to say Mr. Fluffs was everything to me. I cried for a whole 20 minutes with the tiny soft corpse in my arms. I wished so bad that he was alive, and it was enough to trigger my miraculous ability. Mr. Fluffs was already getting cold, but it suddenly was warm again. My pet came back to life. He was completely cured. It wasn't creepy for me at all. It was one of the most joyous moments of my childhood. I obviously didn't understand the entirety of my power back then, but I had the vague conscience that, if I wished very badly for a living being's death to be reversed, it could be done. Rule number 1, I can cure diseases. When the subject is brought back to life, it is back in full health. I learned the other rules along the way. Maybe I regret a few things. Mr. Fluffs lived for another 8 healthy years and died of old age when I was 16. And the second time my power manifested was when a classmate's dog was run over by a Jeep. I was 10 and was at Damien's house that afternoon for a group project. It was ugly and a lot of us children were watching. Me, Damien, and the rest of our group, and at least half a dozen other kids that lived nearby. The dog was a beautiful, shining and sweet golden retriever named Bernard. Bernard died instantly, his bloody neck bent backwards. I was so sad. Damien was an 11-year-old that looked like an angel, with blonde hair and bright blue eyes. He was my first crush. He fell on the floor crying. I wanted so bad to bring his dog back to life. I didn't know that I was being super weird when I ran to the middle of the street to hug a dead dog. But after a few moments, Bernard came back to life. No more blood. He ran happily to his owner while all the other kids cheered. When they asked me how I did that, I lied and I said that I didn't know. Again, I didn't know my power completely, but I was sharp enough to realize nobody else could do it. Besides, I honestly didn't know the details. I just wished that it would live again. Everybody was so happy that I would never have imagined the hell I would go through the next day at school. I suppose my classmates had told their parents what had happened. As I said, it was a rural town. And the kids that cheered for me just the previous day called me a witch and horrible names. And they knocked me unconscious. Had not a teacher intervened, I don't know what would have happened to me. I was punched and kicked and hit with objects by girls and boys, led by Damien. He'd called me an aberration. He said he would kill Bernard because the dog belonged to the devil now. After that day, I never came back to school. I've lost a year. My parents were very worried. They were good enough to care only about my well-being, not about what had happened, so no questions were asked. It was clear that I couldn't live there anymore. People would invade our property at night, burn our plantations, kill our chickens. Mom and Dad couldn't leave the farm, but after a few months, they had arranged for me to live with my aunt in the big city. Before I left, there was a rumor about a dog that wouldn't die. Their owners tried to sacrifice the animal by poisoning it, shooting and even stabbing it multiple times, but nothing would happen. It was like everything was absorbed by the dog's body, and it would remain undamaged. That night, me and my father jumped in Damien's backyard and stole his dog. Bernard licked my face like he knew me forever and was mine all along. Weeks later, taking him to the vet, I found out that he was only 1 year old. Bernard lived another 12 happy years with me. the average age of a golden retriever. Rule number 2. When I bring something back to life, they can't die again unless the time of their natural death has come. My Aunt Shelley was very good to me, but in an unconventional sense. She welcomed my 2 pets, just warning me that I was completely responsible for their care. She paid a good school for me, as long as I would get high grades, and she would completely let me be free if I complied with the house's curfew and didn't show any signs of using drugs. She wasn't the affectionate type, but I honestly think she's great. I live a good life from 10 to 18, never returning to my parents' house again. She provided everything for me. The food was always ready, and the common areas of the house were always clean, and I never felt cold in the winter. My Uncle Anthony, her husband, was a businessman and would rarely ever be home. He was always polite to everyone, and was very good to me in his own distant way. My cousin Daniela was 5 years older than me, and despite not having much in common, we liked each other. She loved Bernard and Mr. Flops, and they got along nicely with their cat, Charlotte. For years, I didn't think much about my power. I know it's too extraordinary, but life was good, and the last time I used it, it was traumatizing. So I lived a normal life for another 4 years. One morning, Daniela knocked impatiently at my door. Hannah, please wake up. Grandma is coming." "What? Come in, please." She opened the door. "Grandma's coming. She'll be living with us, well, with you." Daniela was 19 and had been living in the campus for the most part of the last 2 years. "She's very sick." My family was all scattered around the country, and I didn't have much contact with my grandmother until then. But I loved her so much. I had fond memories of her. Every time she came to visit the farm was a delight for me. When we went downstairs and saw Grandma, she was so frail. She was skin and bones, bald and wrinkled. I was scared to even hold her tight and break her delicate bones. After a few months of living with us and doing chemo, she succumbed to lung cancer. Aunt Shelley and I were by her bed, and at that point, I didn't even know if I could do to people the same thing that I did to animals. But it was worth trying. A good thing that her death wasn't messy. It was like she was peacefully sleeping. When Grandma passed, Shelley immediately went to call the emergency, and when she came back, Grandma was alive again. It was like she had only temporary lung failure. I wished that she would be back, and she was. The cancer was somehow gone within a few days. She was still bald from the chemo and wrinkled of age. She went back to her ideal weight in a couple of weeks and looked healthier, but was still nearly as frail as the cancer had made her. Rule number 3. My ability to recover people's health is limited by the capacity of their age. If they are old and frail, they will remain old and frail, but free of the sickness that had killed them. And Grandma lived for another 2.5 years. The joy of saving lives was everything to me. It was only natural that I would study and pursue a career in medicine. I got a full scholarship, and Shelley was more than glad to help me with my living expenses so I could completely focus on studying. My parents would always visit me. They were left alone when I had left, and since the barbarians in my hometown found somebody else to pick on. Everybody was great except that I never had a boyfriend, and I knew it was because I wasn't made to love them. I platonically fell in love with girls, but decided I would focus on my studies first. My family had always been great with me, but when it comes to acceptance of differences, you never know. I would be too heartbroken to lose them when I was so close to graduation. I could say that I had saved countless lives, but I've kept track of every single one of them. And during my time as an emergency surgeon, I brought back to life 56 deceased patients. I was a genius in my field. Since I had the insurance of being able to cancel death itself, I could be bolder. Just to be clear, I have never done unethical experiments on my patients. I love humanity, and I've loved every single one of them, even if just a bit. I loved their lives and the fact that they would go back to their families thanks to me. I love that most of the time, the tears I brought were tears of happiness. But I tried riskier methods because I knew that they would be safe. That's when I discovered some new rules. Rule number 4. I can only bring back living beings that died under half an hour before. I lost 2 patients before this rule became clear to me. Rule number 5. I don't need to have strong positive feelings about a living being to bring them back to life. I need, however, to genuinely wish that they return. I lost 3 patients because I knew they were dangerous criminals, and what I really thought was that the world would be better off without them. Rule number 6. If I try to bring back someone who died of natural causes, nothing happens, except that I get a strong headache and nausea. I learned that after trying to revert the death of a young man whose heart suddenly stopped. Rule number 7. I can bring people back who attempted suicide, but my limit is only half the time. When my Uncle Anthony had left my Aunt Shelley, she hung herself in the very room that I had spent most of my life in. I got there in 20 minutes and I couldn't save her. I feel so empty. I was working 14-hour shifts at the hospital to try to keep my mind off of my failure. When it would be illegal for me to actually have patients, I would lock myself in my office and do research. I would train newcomers. Hell, once I even cleaned the floors just so I could be busy and distracted. I was 36 years old. I should have been exhausted by the long hours. But when I got home, I would still need Ambien to try to get some sleep. And that's when I met Naja. She was a new nurse at the hospital. Easy smile with gentle eyes, long dark hair, a beautiful body, face and soul. We connected instantly, and she was the first person I ever met that loved saving others more than I did. At 36, I was still focusing on my career and putting off my love life. The week that my aunt died, I had finally went out on my first third date. Things were going okay. Sandy was a friend of a friend and a nice person. I asked for space when things had happened. She said that she was very sorry for my loss and that I could reach out whenever I needed to. I'm so sorry, Sandy. I wasn't ghosting you. I really only felt ready to date again when I fell in love with someone else. Things were so easy with Naja. We'd known each other for 2 months before she entered my office and asked me when I would take her on a date in the most charming, innocent way. She was funny, confident, and brave. I took her to a fancy restaurant on the same night. We ate a 5-course meal and all the portions were extremely diminutive. Naja told me that she was still hungry and I laughed and said me too. We ended the night laying on the grass and eating hot dogs like 2 teenagers. Naja was 23, 13 years younger than me. Being with her was the most liberating thing in my existence. I felt young inside and silly in the most sublime way. I discovered parts of my body that I would never come to light without her. Her goodness made her even more stunningly gorgeous. I loved literally everything about her. I knew she was the first and probably only person in the world that I could share my secret with. We were in bed watching a funny movie when I rode close to her and softly caught a lock of her soft hair between my fingers. You know, you are by far the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. I feel like I can bare my soul to you and you will always understand who I am. She seemed surprised and smiled sweetly. Baby, thanks for trusting me. I feel the same way with you. You know, I held her closer and I whispered, when I was 8, my bunny died. It really died, but I wished it back to life, and it lived until I was 16. Her face flaunted a half smile. I know she wasn't making fun of me or even in disbelief. It seemed that she didn't understand that I was already getting to the point. She looked like somebody humoring somebody else who's telling a tale, waiting patiently for the punchline. When I was 10, I brought back a dog, Bernard, who was run over. People thought that I was a witch and tried to kill the dog, but he simply wouldn't die. I had to leave town. I took the dog with me and he lived another 12 years. You're so great, baby. You're too amazing for this world. She kissed me all over. I would love to listen to every single one of your stories, but I just want you to know that it's a privilege to be chosen by a pure and gifted person like you. I really love you so much. She had said enough. After that, I told her all of my stories. In the last 10 years, I told the same stories more than 18 times. Nausea had her favorites. I liked the time I put back together a kid that was completely torn apart by a tractor, before anybody else could enter the room and see all of the gore. This boy died for good in his sleep 5 years after. His destiny was short, but he had the privilege to live his whole programmed life. Nausea was fascinated with fate. She said we would get very old together. She would give me a bath and we both would die together over the effort. I would be 96 and she would be 83. And then she always added, "If fate and your miraculous ability let us, I don't mind dying now as long as I can die with you, so we can be together always, somewhere." Around 5 months ago, I started feeling sick and empty. I knew my life with Nausea was perfect. We were married, still working together, both very successful and accepted by our families. I couldn't think of a single thing that could be improved in my life. I had a soulmate, a fulfilling job, and enough money to feel safe when I'm old. It was Nausea that had the groundbreaking idea. We should volunteer as medical aid in a poor region, someplace torn apart by war and really in need of help. Think about how many lives you could save. I'm so glad that she had suggested it. Those are truly the best months of my life. In less than a week, we were there. I won't tell you where, it makes no difference to the story. It desperately needed resources and people. We lived in a big tent with 3 other volunteers, Joanna, Mark, and Ruth. We all got along well. We all had the same objective, saving lives. Taking cold showers and only having 3 changes of clothes was an honor because it was for the sake of doing something that really mattered. My whole life I was satisfied with my job, but nothing could ever compare to how I felt in that desolate, hopeless place. It was the first time I felt like I was really answering my calling. Every life that I saved was precious and important, but the salvation I brought here really was something else. It was the purpose of a lifetime. The happiness that I felt drowned the feeling of emptiness. They were there, but soundless. They tried to scream, but they would never reach me. Until I started to feel weak physically and the local healer came to visit me. Let's call her Madre. She was a very old lady, with placid eyes and a wise smile on her milk chocolate colored face. Her voice was gregarious and slow. We both spoke Spanish, despite it not being a common language in the area. She learned just by talking to people over the years. "You're good, my girl. You are doing the Lord's work. But I should warn you, everything has a price. I don't mean to boast, but I performed many times one of the greatest wonders humanity craves to achieve. And my life has been so good. I don't feel like I ever paid a price. What is the price? It's your soul." "I'm sorry. I thought that I was doing the Lord's work." I was confused. Is that a Spanish word that I misheard? "You are. It's a demon that claims your soul. You simply use it as the material to reanimate the bodies, to make them whole again, and bring back the souls of the deceased. But your ability has a limit. Souls are finite, so the limit is the size of your soul." "Do you know what the limit is, Madre?" She assented but said nothing. After a long pause, she spoke again. Her voice was low, but thunderous like a bass singer. "Have you counted how many lives you'd saved with your ability until now?" "Yes, Madre." "Tell me." "Before I had met my wife, I had saved 59 living creatures. I saved 40 more lives in the last 9 to 10 years in my country, and then I brought back 299 souls here. My girl, when you reach your limit, you will get very, very sick. You will die within a week after that. There's no escaping it. Don't you feel a weird, unexplainable emptiness sometimes?" Yes, Madre, that describes me perfectly. It's because your soul isn't complete. It's getting thinner and thinner. Do you know why? It's because I'm reaching my limit. Yes, your limit is 400. In the next days, I felt better. I worked non-stop. I fortunately could save many lives just using my mundane abilities as a doctor. Joanna and Ruth, my fellow volunteers, went back to their countries in the same week with 2 days of difference. I threw them a small party. Ruth was an older doctor and her calmness was crucial in many moments. Joanna was a nurse in her mid-20s. She was always ready for the uglier jobs, like helping limbless people take baths or carrying corpses in her arms. She was the definition of strong, body and mind. They were both great companions, with qualities that complemented perfectly mine and Naja's. Mike was not so great. Both he and Naja were in their mid-30s, so she was the only one that he ever talked to. He apparently thought of himself as some kind of group coordinator, and the guy would rarely actually help. He was mostly there just to boss us around. I decided to keep my irritation to myself, since he had never done anything explicitly wrong, but he was rude and unhelpful, except when it came to my wife. She was always so polite to him, hoping that her attitude towards him would make him change for the better with the rest of us, but that was not the case. I wasn't jealous because everything that Naj ever did was act in a way that reassured me that she didn't have eyes for anybody else, but I was still annoyed. 6 days ago, I was coming back to our tent after visiting a patient. It was a 2-year-old girl that lost a leg and had a terrible fever, but thankfully it was slowly lowering. When I approached our lodging, I heard screams. They were Naja's. I ran as fast as I could to save her from whatever it was, and thankfully, my brain had managed to make my steps furtive enough. I could discern words now. I will never be yours. I will never be anybody else's. If you insist on this shit, I'd gladly rather die. So you think it's better to fuck some old bitch than me? You have some guts, don't you? Fuck you, you sick. I love Hannah. You're rotten. The moment I got inside the tent, Mark snapped Naja's neck. It was all so fast. He had a terribly evil look on his face while he squeezed your beautiful skin. Just like that, in only a fraction of a second, the person I loved more than anything in the world was dead. I kept on running in the direction. He laughed and he drew a gun. I wouldn't stop. If he shot me, then so be it. But he didn't. Before I could reach him, he shot himself in the head. I knew that he was dead instantly, but it didn't stop me from punching him in the face repeatedly. And 2 minutes after, the military showed up. The timing was like a movie. I was in a dreamlike state. I was so hurt, but I couldn't even feel the pain I had inside before my anger let out. Is that man Myuuji Thompson? One of the 5 soldiers asked me, and then he turned to Naja's body. You know her? I nodded, still sitting over Mark's chest and punching his corpse. It honestly was a mess. This man murdered over 30 women. We came to get him. Is he fucking dead? A female soldier asked. I could see her face, her age very well. She used her elbow to poke the soldier who spoke first, relaxing the grasp on his gun. I can't believe you won't get to pay for all of that. Maybe he will, I murmured. I'm a doctor, and maybe he's alive. No matter what I did, it was the end of the line for me anyway. I knew that Naja adored me as much as I adored her, and that she wouldn't want to live without me, the same way that I wouldn't want to live without her. I had a choice to make, and honestly, it wasn't that hard. We both had blessed lives until now. It was arrogant of me to assume that I could just keep reviving people and animals forever. I regret not trying harder to save my patients by the natural means. I regret every person that died by my hand, no matter how many others I was able to save. I regret not knowing all the rules of my power when I had the chance to save Shelley, one of the most precious ones in the world to me. I'm so sorry, Shelley. I'm so sorry, Naja. I'm coming for you. I was taken home in the military's plane. In another plane was Myuuji Thompson, the murderer of my wife, who was taken to a maximum security prison. I heard that in his first day he was beaten nearly to death by other prisoners. Nearly because he can't die. I would be lying if I said the thought didn't warm my heart. I don't see myself as a petty person. If I had the chance to revive my wife and keep on living with her, I would, but I can't. I believe the greater good is here to make him pay. Is letting the families of the girls and women he murdered sleep a little more at peace, knowing justice was made and he will never again make another victim. I held a beautiful funeral for my beloved Naja. I spent my last days under the care of my family. I'm very ill. A close friend prescribed me some painkillers, but that's it. Right now, I'm so weak I had to dictate the words so my mother could write this post for me. My family was shocked and moved to learn my story. I'm so glad I had a week to say goodbye to everybody that I love. All my friends from the hospital came to see me. Even in my deathbed, I'm lucky. My life was not so long, but it was full of joy. I have no more regrets. Naja loved helping others more than anything. She would be happy to know that her death wasn't pointless. Mark deserves to live a long life and suffer. Me? My ability was a blessing because it kept families and loved ones together until it really was time to say goodbye. But there is something even greater than being alive in this world. I believe that we all get a chance to live again when we die.